Night Rain and Secrets. Chapter 1. The Woman in the Night. Chicago, 2025, was a city drowning in rain and secrets. The sky unleashed torrents as if determined to cleanse the streets of their sins, but the deluge only deepened the city's shadows. Cold winds whipped off Lake Michigan, carrying the briny scent of salt, the metallic tang of rusted steel, and the faint, acrid whiff of cigarette smoke from alleyways where deals were made and lives were lost. Neon lights from skyscrapers bled onto the wet pavement, their reds, greens, and yellows pooling like spilled blood, dissolving into the night. The city's pulse was a chaotic symphony, car horns blaring, drunken laughter spilling from dive bars, the relentless patter of rain, and the hurried footsteps of those who dared to wander after dark. Jack Carver sat alone in his cramped office on the 7th floor of a crumbling building in the Loop. The walls reeked of mildew, and the ancient elevator groaned like a soul trapped in purgatory. His office was a study in decay, a chipped wooden desk scarred by years of use, a torn leather armchair that sagged under his weight, a rusty filing cabinet stuffed with ghosts of old cases, and a desk lamp casting a sickly yellow glow, like the jaundiced eyes of a dying man. A half-burned cigarette smoldered in an ashtray, its smoke curling like the tangled thoughts in Jack's mind. Beside it sat a bottle of cheap whiskey, its amber contents his only anchor against the sleepless nights. He poured a shot, the liquid burning his throat, a sharp reminder that he was still alive, though some days he wondered if that was a blessing or a curse. At 38, Jack was a private investigator, the kind you called when the police had given up or when their badges were too dirty to trust. His disheveled black hair framed gray eyes that cut like steel, and a small scar on his left temple throbbed with the memory of a decade-old case. Back then, as a Chicago PD detective, he'd lost his partner, Eddie Malone, in a brutal ambush at the docks, a setup that reeked of betrayal. Eddie's death had shattered Jack, turning a driven cop into a man who lived in the shadows, trusting no one, not even himself. The past clung to him like damp rot, and as he stared out the window at the endless rain, he wondered if Chicago would ever let men like him go. A knock at the door shattered the silence, firm yet hesitant, as if the visitor were teetering on the edge of retreat. Jack glanced at the wall clock, 10:17 p.m. Late-night clients were trouble, and Jack had a lifetime's worth already. He stubbed out his cigarette, the ember hissing in protest, and called through the warped wooden door. "Come in!" The door creaked open, revealing a woman framed in the dim hallway light. She was about 30, slender, with golden blonde hair tied in a neat bun, though wet strands clung to her pale face, betraying a frantic dash through the storm. Her beige trench coat, expensive and tailored, was soaked, clinging to her frame like a second skin. Her blue eyes flickered with a mix of fear and determination, sharp enough to cut through the haze of Jack's whiskey-soaked thoughts. She stood frozen for a moment, clutching a leather purse so tightly her knuckles whitened, like a cornered animal deciding whether to flee or fight. "I'm Emily Harper," she said, her voice trembling but striving for control. "I need your help, Mr. Carver." Jack gestured to the chair across his desk, pushing the ashtray aside. He studied her, the nervous grip on her purse, the way her eyes darted to the corners of the room. She was too perfect, like a portrait painted to deceive, and that set his nerves on edge. "What's the story, Miss Harper?" Emily sat, her movements deliberate, as if every gesture were rehearsed. She took a deep breath, her hands tightening around her purse. "My husband, David Harper, is dead. The police say he jumped from our penthouse balcony. Suicide. But I don't believe it. David wasn't that kind of man. He loved life, his work, our plans. We were going to Europe next month, talking about a house in the suburbs, maybe kids someday. A man like that doesn't just..." Her voice broke and she looked away, a tear tracing her cheek. Jack leaned back, his chair creaking. He'd heard stories like this before, grief masking denial, but something in Emily's voice, a raw edge beneath her polished facade, caught his attention. He sipped his whiskey, letting the burn sharpen his focus. "You got proof it wasn't suicide?" Emily's hands trembled as she rummaged through her purse, pulling out an old phone with a cracked screen. She placed it on the desk like it was a live grenade. "David left this in our safe. He said if anything happened to him, I should find someone trustworthy, someone who could dig deeper than the police. I think he meant you." Jack picked up the phone, his fingers brushing the cold, cracked glass. Emily gave him the code, and he unlocked it. A single text message glowed on the screen, sent from an unknown number. "If I die, it's not by choice. Find Carver. He knows how to dig deep." Jack read it 3 times, a chill slithering down his spine. His name in a dead man's message was a bad omen, like a storm cloud breaking open. He scrolled through the phone, but it was wiped clean except for that one text, a lone whisper from the grave. He met Emily's gaze, searching for cracks in her story. "How did David know me?" Her eyes flickered, a brief hesitation. "He mentioned you once, said you helped a friend of his years ago, a missing persons case, I think. David said you were relentless, that you'd find the truth no matter how deep it was buried." Jack's memory stirred, but the case was a blur, one of dozens from his past. He'd helped too many people, buried too many ghosts to recall them all. But Emily's eyes, pleading yet guarded, pulled him in. Was she a victim, or was she playing him? He needed to know. "I'm in," he said, his voice steady. "But I need everything. David's job, his friends, his enemies. No secrets, Ms. Harper. If you're holding back, this ends now." Emily nodded, but her hesitation lingered, a shadow in her gaze. She stood, adjusting her coat, and left, her perfume, a faint trace of jasmine, mingling with the room's mildew. Jack watched her silhouette vanish through the frosted glass door, the rain's rhythm swallowing her footsteps. He poured another whiskey, lit a fresh cigarette, and stared at the phone. Emily Harper was a puzzle, and Jack hated puzzles he couldn't solve. The rain fell harder, and he knew this case would drag him into Chicago's darkest corners. Chapter 2. The starting line morning brought no relief from the rain, which cloaked Chicago in a gray, suffocating mist. Jack navigated his 1970 Ford Mustang through the city's choked streets. The engine's growl, a defiant roar against the din of honking horns, shouting vendors, and the relentless drumming of rain on his windshield. The wipers thumped like a heartbeat, barely keeping up with the deluge. His destination was a glass tower downtown, where David Harper had lived and died. The penthouse on the 35th floor was the crime scene, and Jack needed to see it before the police erased every trace of the truth. He parked in a narrow alley, the Mustang's tires crunching over shattered glass and sodden newspapers. The rain soaked his trench coat as he stepped out, lighting a cigarette to steady his nerves. The ember glowed briefly, a fleeting defiance against the storm. The tower loomed ahead, its mirrored facade reflecting a distorted Chicago, gray, fractured, unyielding. In the lobby, a security guard named Vince, built like a linebacker in a cheap suit, blocked Jack's path. His badge gleamed under the fluorescent lights, and his hand rested near a holstered pistol, a silent warning. "Private investigator," Jack said, flashing his worn PI license. "Here to see the Harper penthouse." Vince's eyes narrowed, his jaw tight. "Police cleared that scene days ago. No access." Jack slid a 50 across the polished counter, his gaze locked on Vince's. "5 minutes. I'm not here to make trouble." Vince pocketed the bill, his expression sour. "Elevator's over there. Touch anything, and you're done." Jack nodded, stepping into the elevator, its mirrored walls reflecting a man who looked more phantom than detective. The ascent was silent, but his mind churned with questions. Why had David jumped? And why was Emily so sure it wasn't suicide? The elevator opened to a hallway of muted opulence. Plush carpet, dim sconces, the faint scent of lavender masking something darker. The penthouse door was sealed with police tape, a flimsy barrier Jack bypassed with a quick pick of the lock. Inside, David Harper's home was a monument to wealth, glossy walnut floors, Italian leather furniture, a tempered glass dining table catching the storm's gray light. An abstract painting hung on the wall, its chaotic swirls of black and red echoing Jack's tangled thoughts. The air was sharp with cleaning chemicals, but a faint metallic undertone lingered. Death's stubborn signature. Jack moved with purpose, his boots silent on the polished floor. The living room was pristine. No signs of a struggle, no overturned furniture. But a half-empty glass of red wine on the dining table stopped him cold, beside an untouched plate of seared steak and roasted vegetables. Emily had been clear. David was allergic to alcohol, a fact he'd never ignored. Jack crouched, studying the glass. No fingerprints, no lipstick, but a faint smudge suggested it had been wiped down. He slipped it into an evidence bag, his mind racing. Whose glass was this, and why had the police missed it? He stepped onto the balcony, the wind hitting him like a blade, carrying the rain's chill and the city's distant hum. The balcony was a narrow slab of concrete, its railings slick with water. Far below, Chicago pulsed, cars crawling, neon signs flickering, oblivious to the tragedy above. Jack leaned over the edge, imagining David's final moments. A man with his wealth, his power, his wife, why surrender? The official report claimed he was alone, but that wine glass screamed otherwise. A shadow moved in the hallway, and Jack's hand went to his revolver. A figure stepped into the light. Lieutenant Mike Russo, his old friend from the force. Russo was broad-shouldered, his salt and pepper hair thinning, his eyes weary under a weathered police coat. The smell of cigarettes clung to him, and his tie hung crooked, a sign of a man fraying at the edges. "Carver," Russo said, his voice gruff but tinged with regret. "You're stirring up shit you can't handle." Jack kept his hand near his gun. "Just doing my job, Mike." "You?" Russo sighed, rubbing his temples. "Cleaning up your mess. This is a closed case." Harper jumped. "Security footage shows no one entered that night. No weapons, no note. Clean." "Cameras can be doctored," Jack shot back, stepping closer. "And that wine glass? Harper didn't drink." "Allergic," his wife said. "You telling me you missed that?" Russo's jaw tightened, sweat beading on his brow despite the cold. "Maybe he broke his rules. Or the wife's lying. People do that, Jack." Jack studied Russo, noting the unease in his eyes. They'd worked together for years, cracking cases that kept them up at night, but now a chasm divided them. Russo was part of a system Jack no longer trusted. "Who's got you spooked, Mike?" Jack asked, his voice low. "Novatech? Someone bigger?" Russo's face darkened. "You're chasing shadows, Carver. Drop it or you'll regret it. Novatech's not some startup. They've got friends in high places." He turned to leave, but Jack grabbed his arm. "We used to fight for the truth," Jack said, his grip tight. "What happened to you?" Russo yanked free, his eyes blazing. "I grew up. You should try it." He stormed off, leaving Jack alone in the penthouse, the rain hammering the windows. The betrayal cut deep, but it confirmed Jack's suspicions. Someone was pulling Russo's strings. Back at his office, Jack poured a whiskey and lit a cigarette, the smoke curling like his doubts. Novatech was prepping a billion-dollar IPO, and David had been their financial mastermind. Numbers like that bred enemies. Jack called Sarah Klein, a freelance hacker with neon green hair and a mouth sharper than her code. Her Logan Square apartment was a chaotic hub of computers and Red Bull cans. "I need everything on Novatech," Jack said over the phone. "Accounts, emails, transactions, anything dirty." Sarah's laugh crackled through the line. "You're gonna owe me a steak dinner at Gibson's, Carver. Midnight calls? I need sleep too." Jack's lips twitched. "Find something good, and I'll throw in a bottle of whiskey. The good stuff." He hung up, staring at the evidence bag with the wine glass. It was a loose thread, and Jack was ready to pull until the whole damn web unraveled. Chapter 3. Under the Streetlights. To unravel David Harper, Jack needed to dig into his past, where secrets festered like wounds. He started at the Chicago Public Library, a fortress of marble and knowledge that smelled of aged paper and buried truths. The rain battered the stained glass windows as Jack hunched over microfilm readers and dusty terminals, his fingers stained with ink. Articles painted David as a financial prodigy, poached from a Boston firm for his knack for turning data into gold. But a decade-old story caught Jack's eye. David had been investigated for financial fraud, accused of funneling millions through offshore accounts for shady investors. The case was dropped, but the stain lingered, a whisper of something darker. Jack scribbled notes, his mind racing. fraud allegations didn't fit the image of a devoted husband planning a suburban life. Was David a victim or a player in a dangerous game? He needed more, so he called Charlie Specs Thompson, a freelance journalist who thrived on corporate scandals. Charlie was a wiry man with thick glasses, a compulsive gum-chewing habit, and a nose for dirt. They agreed to meet at a greasy diner in Chinatown, a dive where the air was thick with soy sauce, sizzling woks, and the weight of secrets. The diner was a relic, its formica tables sticky, its fluorescent lights flickering like a bad omen. Jack slid into a corner booth, the vinyl seat creaking. Charlie arrived, his rain-soaked coat dripping, his glasses fogged. He ordered coffee and dumplings, popping his gum as he slid a manila folder across the table. Harper wasn't clean, Charlie said, his voice low. He had ties to Eastern European investors, guys with rap sheets longer than Lakeshore Drive. I dug into it years ago, but my source ended up dead in a bathtub. Cops called it suicide. Ring any bells? Jack's gut twisted, the parallel chilling. Novatech know about his past? Charlie leaned closer, his gum snapping. Novatech's a front for something bigger, a network I call the Web. They've got tentacles in finance, politics, even the cops. Harper was their golden boy, but if he crossed them, he was dead meat. Jack flipped through the folder, finding grainy photos of David meeting men in suits in dark parking lots. One name stood out: Viktor Morozov, a Ukrainian financier with ties to organized crime. Morozov still in Chicago? Jack asked. Charlie shook his head. Vanished after Harper's death. But he's here, pulling strings from the shadows. Watch yourself, Jack. The Web doesn't like loose ends. Jack left the diner, the rain soaking his coat. As he reached his car, his phone buzzed with an anonymous text. Stop digging, Carver. You're playing a dangerous game, or you're next. The number was untraceable, a burner, but the message was a knife in the dark. Someone was scared, and that meant Jack was close. He drove to Little Italy, to Mama Rosa's speakeasy-style bar, hidden behind a laundromat. The place was a time capsule. Faded photos of Chicago's underworld, the air thick with bourbon and cigar smoke. Rosa, a heavyset woman with sharp eyes and a smile that could charm or cut, poured Jack a whiskey. Harper was in deep, Rosa said, wiping a glass. Met with rough types, men who don't work for companies but for shadows. He was scared, Jackie. Said he'd seen something he couldn't unsee. Names, Jack pressed, sipping the whiskey, its burn grounding him. Rosa shook her head. Just whispers. These guys aren't local. They come from places where the sun don't shine. Be careful. Outside, a black sedan idled across the street, its tinted windows reflecting the neon sign above Rosa's bar. Jack memorized the plate, his heart pounding. Later, a DMV contact revealed it was stolen, reported months ago. The rain fell harder, and Jack felt the city's jaws closing around him. That night, he returned to his office, spreading Charlie's folder across his desk. Harper's fraud allegations, his ties to Morozov, the Web. It was a puzzle, and Jack was missing pieces. He lit a cigarette, the smoke curling like a question mark. He needed Morozov, or someone who knew him. The answers were out there, in Chicago's rain-soaked underbelly, and Jack was ready to hunt. Chapter 4. The Secret Network. 2 days later, Sarah Klein stormed into Jack's office, her neon green hair damp, her eyes blazing with sleepless energy. She clutched a USB drive and a jumbo coffee, her black hoodie stained with soy sauce. Novatech's dirtier than a South Side alley, she said, tossing the USB onto the desk. Cracked 3 layers of encryption to get into their servers. They know someone's poking around, Jack. Jack plugged the USB into his laptop, his pulse quickening. Hundreds of encrypted emails between David and Spector filled the screen, laced with financial jargon and cryptic phrases. One line stopped him cold. They know we saw it. If I disappear, release everything. What had David seen? And who was they? The emails were coded as if David and Spector knew they were being watched. Trace Spector, Jack said, his voice sharp. Name, location, anything. Sarah nodded, cracking her knuckles. Give me a few hours, but this is big, Jack. Be ready. While Sarah worked, Jack followed a lead from Rosa to the Rusty Anchor, a dive bar in South Chicago's crumbling heart. The neighborhood was a wasteland of broken streetlights and wailing sirens. Jack parked a block away, the rain hammering his Mustang. He checked his revolver and stepped into the storm, his coat heavy with water. The Rusty Anchor was a pit, cheap beer, stale cigarettes, and sweat. Grizzled men in leather jackets played pool, their eyes tracking Jack. A jukebox blared a distorted blues riff, clashing with clinking bottles and muttered curses. A waitress with fiery red hair gave Jack a half smile, her eyes wary. Jack slid onto a bar stool, ordering a beer from Frankie, a bear of a man with a scruffy beard and shifty eyes. He slid a 20 across the counter. Looking for Spectre. Frankie's eyes flicked to the bill, then the room. He leaned in, his breath sour. Spectre's Victor Kane, ex-Novatech tech guy, got in deep and bailed, hiding in the warehouses by the river. Steer clear, pal. He's a dead man. Jack slid another 20. Which warehouse? Frankie's gaze darted to the back door. Old steel mill, by the river's bend. But you're asking for trouble. Jack left, his Mustang's battery dead, forcing him to trek through the industrial district on foot. The area was a graveyard of rusted warehouses, their frames like tombstones. The ground was mud and oil, the air thick with the river's chemical stench. Jack moved carefully, his boots sinking, his hand near his gun. He found Victor Kane in a decaying warehouse, hunched beside rotting crates. Kane was a wreck, skeletal, unshaven, with bloodshot eyes. His tattered coat hung off him, a rusty pistol glinting beside him. The warehouse was a damp void, echoing with dripping pipes and scurrying rats. You, Carver? Kane rasped, trembling. Harper said you'd come. Talk, Jack said, keeping his distance. What did Harper know? Kane's laugh was a broken sob. Novatech's a front, billions laundered for a syndicate. David wanted to expose them, but they got him first. I gave him the data, and now they're after me. Who's they? Jack demanded. Kane shook his head, sweat dripping. No names, just shadows. Cops, senators, CEOs, everywhere. You're next, Carver. A car door slammed outside, footsteps crunching. Jack grabbed Kane, pulling him behind a crate. Two figures in black coats entered, their silenced pistols glinting. Find him, one growled, his accent Eastern European. Jack's heart pounded as he signaled Kane to stay silent. The intruders swept the room, their boots splashing. Jack spotted a rusted fire escape ladder and nudged Kane toward it. A crate toppled, the crash echoing. There, a man shouted, firing. Jack fired back, the muzzle flash lighting the dark. A bullet grazed his arm, burning, but he dragged Kane up the ladder to the roof. The rain was a torrent, blurring the skyline. Jack pushed Kane toward a fire escape, but Kane stumbled, gasping. They'll never stop. Jack slid down the escape, landing in a muddy alley, and sprinted into the night, pursuit fading. His arm bled, but he'd escaped. For now, the syndicate was real, and they wanted him dead. Chapter 5. The Enemy's Mind. Jack stumbled into his office, the rain mixing with blood from his grazed arm. He locked the door, pulled the blinds, and slumped into his chair, pouring whiskey over the wound. The pain was a white-hot scream, but it kept him sharp. He wrapped his arm with a rag, his mind on Emily Harper. Her story was too polished, her grief too perfect. The way she clutched her purse, the pauses in her speech, it felt rehearsed. Was she a widow or a spider? Jack needed answers. He lit a cigarette, the smoke curling like his doubts, and replayed their meeting. Her trembling hands, the cracked phone, his name in David's message. It was too convenient. The missing persons case she mentioned was a haze, a favor from years ago, but nothing tied it to David. Jack's gut screamed she was hiding something, and his gut was rarely wrong. He arranged to meet Emily at the Amber Lantern, a Wicker Park cafe where amber lanterns cast a warm glow and jazz drifted like smoke. Jack took a corner table, his back to the wall, and ordered a black coffee, its steam rising like a warning. Emily arrived late, her blonde hair loose, her eyes red and puffy. She wore a navy sweater and jeans, less glamorous but still graceful. She sat, avoiding his gaze, and ordered chamomile tea. "You knew what David was doing," Jack said, his voice cutting through the cafe's hum. "No more secrets. Give me everything." Emily's hands trembled around her cup. "I'm terrified, Jack. David said they'd kill me if I talked. He left a hard drive in our bedroom safe. It's important." Jack studied her, searching for lies. Her fear seemed real, but her eyes darted. "A tell. Take me to it, now." They drove to Lincoln Park, the rain relentless. Emily's apartment was elegant, with modern furniture and photos of her and David, smiling in Paris, laughing on a beach. Jack studied David's face, confident but shadowed. Emily opened a safe behind a Stormy Sea painting, pulling out a black hard drive. She handed it to Jack, her hands shaking. "This is all I have left of him." Jack pocketed the drive, his instincts screaming trap. Why was this so easy? He left, the rain hammering like a warning. At Sarah's Logan Square apartment, surrounded by blinking screens and Red Bull cans, he handed her the drive. "Work your magic," he said. Sarah grinned. "You're racking up a tab, Carver." She worked through the night and at sunrise called, her voice buzzing. "Get over here. This is bigger than Novatech." In Sarah's cluttered space, Jack reviewed the files. Novatech's money laundering scheme tied to the syndicate. Billions flowed through shell companies in the Caymans, Switzerland, Dubai. Names of politicians, CEOs, a Chicago judge appeared. But the files were time-stamped after David's death. Planted. Jack was being played. He returned to the warehouse to confront Kane, finding him dead, a bullet through his skull, staged as suicide. The police closed the case in hours, but Jack knew better. Standing in the rain-drenched warehouse, rage boiled inside. He was a puppet, and someone was pulling the strings. Chapter 6. The Spiral of Deceit. Jack holed up in his office for 3 days. The rain a constant companion. He pored over Sarah's files, Charlie's leads, Rosa's whispers. The syndicate wasn't just laundering money. They rigged global markets, from stocks to crypto, with operatives in governments, police, corporations. Novatech's CEO, Richard Langston, was a key player, but a puppet. The real power was the architect, a ghost no one could name. Jack needed Langston. Charlie tipped him off about a charity gala at the Peninsula Hotel, a fortress of wealth. He dug out a worn black suit, shaved, and tucked his revolver into a holster. The ballroom dazzled. Crystal chandeliers, elites in tuxedos and gowns. Jack felt like a wolf among sheep. He spotted Langston, silver-haired, his smile cold as steel, schmoozing investors. Jack cornered him near a buffet table. "I know about the syndicate," he said, bluffing. "Talk, or the world knows." Langston's smile didn't falter, but his eyes flickered. "You're chasing ghosts, Carver. Walk away, or you'll end up like Harper." Jack held his gaze, noting the fear behind his arrogance. He left, sensing eyes on his back. A black SUV idled outside, its plate untraceable. Russo called that night, his voice strained. "Leave Chicago, Jack. They're bigger than me." Jack knew Russo was compromised. He decided to leak the files through Sarah. They met at an uptown diner, its booths cracked, Sinatra on the jukebox. "Blast these to Reuters, BBC, everyone," Jack said, sliding a USB across. Sarah nodded, grim. "This is war, Jack." That night, Sarah vanished. Jack found her in a West Side abandoned hotel, battered, bleeding, her laptop smashed. "Emily? She's not what she seems," Sarah gasped. Jack carried her to a safe house in Evanston, his rage burning. Emily was the key, and he was done playing games. Chapter 7. Facing the Past. With Sarah safe, Jack dug into Emily. Charlie pulled records. Emily Harper didn't exist before 2020, a fabricated identity. Jack confronted her at her apartment, the rain a funeral dirge. She stood by the window, her eyes a storm of fear and defiance. "Talk," Jack growled. "Who are you?" Emily crumbled. "I was a nobody, a runaway. The syndicate trained me, sent me to watch David. I fell in love. He found their secrets, and I begged him to stop. The architect had him killed, forced me to play the widow to lure you in." "Who's the architect?" Jack demanded. "I don't know," she sobbed. "They wanted you to find the files, to test you, release them, and we're dead." Jack uploaded the files to a hidden server, sending links to global news outlets. He took Emily to the safe house, leaving her with Sarah. Clutching a list of syndicate names, Langston, Russo, a senator, a judge, he fled Chicago, the city's neon fading in his rearview mirror. Chapter 8. The Survivor. 2 months later, Jack lived as Thomas Reed in Seattle, where the rain fell harder than in Chicago. His apartment was sparse: a table, a whiskey bottle, a revolver. The leaked files collapsed Novatech, exposed corrupt officials. Langston was in prison, Russo under investigation, but the architect remained a ghost. Each night, Jack stared at Seattle's neon lights, whiskey in hand, haunted by Emily, David, Sarah. A message buzzed: "You can't hide, Carver. The rain doesn't wash sins." He deleted it, but the words lingered. The syndicate was watching. Jack poured another whiskey, the scar on his temple throbbing. He'd keep fighting, keep digging, until the truth was bare. The rain fell, and the secrets waited in the dark.